Welcome to another episode in Minds in Motion. Picture this. It is January of 2025. The richest man alive walks into the most bureaucratic building on Earth, and he's carrying a chainsaw.
Well, metaphorically speaking, of course.
Right, metaphorically. But, I mean, that imagery, it just perfectly captures the sheer disruptive energy of this 130-day collision we are analyzing today.
It really does, because we are looking at what happens when raw, unfiltered startup ambition rams head-on into the massive machinery of the United States government.
Exactly. And before we get into the actual mechanics of that collision, I want to frame how we look at events like this for you, the listener, because this channel is managed by Dr. Sharifan, a faculty member from the University of Texas and an Aggie graduate from Texas A&M University.
Yeah, and having that academic foundation, it means we apply a strict scientist lens to everything we do in this deep dive.
Meaning we leave the political theater, the partisan talking points, we leave all of that at the door. Left-wing or right-wing figures, it honestly makes no difference to our analysis.
None at all. Our objective today is to treat this event purely as an experiment. We want to extract the underlying data.
Right. And from the source material, we have identified 3 specific failures and 2 wins from this case study, which we are calling the Musk Equation.
I like that name. It really fits.
Okay, let's unpack this. If we are framing this entire 130-day stint not as a political event, but as a massive, high-stakes scientific experiment, we really need to establish the baseline parameters first.
Right, the initial inputs.
And the inputs here are just staggering. I mean, we are talking about nearly $300 million spent backing the political campaign, which, yielded immediate, highly visible access.
Incredible access, right?
Yeah. The result was the title of Head of the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, a physical desk in the West Wing, and reportedly even a bed in the Lincoln bedroom.
And we have to look at the ultimate objective of this experiment, which was cutting $2 trillion from the federal budget.
$2 trillion. Just an astronomical number.
It is. And the hypothesis being tested here is what I call the velocity hypothesis. It is this belief that the speed, the agility, and that really aggressive cost-cutting nature of a Silicon Valley startup, that specific velocity, could just be directly transplanted into a 2 million-person federal bureaucracy.
To achieve that massive financial cut.
Sure.
Right. But I struggle with the fundamental premise there. I mean, to me, it feels like transplanting a high-revving sports car engine directly into a massive, heavy-laden cargo ship.
That is a great way to visualize it.
Right, because a sports car engine is designed to go 0 to 60 in 3 seconds on a completely smooth track. But the cargo ship, it is designed to move millions of tons across a volatile ocean, and it takes, 5 miles just to turn the rudder?
Exactly. The physics are entirely different.
So was the expectation that the ship would suddenly turn on a dime just supreme hubris? Or a fundamental misunderstanding of institutional physics?
I wouldn't necessarily call it hubris. It is actually a very rational assumption if your entire career has been spent in domains where immense capital and brilliant engineering can pretty much bypass traditional physics.
Okay, that is fair.
Yeah, like in a tech startup, the environment is highly malleable. If the CEO wants to pivot the company's direction, they can execute that pivot by Tuesday afternoon.
Send an email, have a meeting, and it's done.
Exactly. But a government is not a company. It is a complex ecosystem designed with heavy friction on purpose. The framers of the system, they built in checks, balances, and massive bureaucratic hurdles, specifically so a single actor couldn't change the direction of the country on a whim.
That built-in friction is exactly where the experiment hit its first major wall, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And a failed hypothesis isn't a wasted experiment in science. It is just data.
Right. It's just data.
Yeah.
So let's look at the data on that $2 trillion promise, because the system actively pushed back. The first failure in our equation is that the ambition was fundamentally incompatible with the math of the system.
The math just wasn't there. As 130 days ticked by, that $2 trillion number had to be walked back repeatedly.
Because you really have to look at the mechanics of the federal budget to understand why. The government spends roughly $6 to $7 trillion a year.
Right, but the vast majority of that is what we call mandatory spending. These are things like Medicare, Social Security, and interest on the national debt.
Which you cannot touch without an act of Congress.
Exactly. You literally cannot touch it.
Which means to find $2 trillion in cuts, you are looking almost entirely at discretionary spending. And if you try to cut $2 trillion out of discretionary spending, you aren't just trimming the fat.
No, you are essentially amputating entire limbs of the government at that point.
You'd have to eliminate the Department of Defense, the Department of Education, and a dozen other agencies just to get close. And the real gut punch of the data is that independent trackers found federal spending in 2025 was actually slightly higher than the previous year.
Oh, wow. Really? Higher.
Yeah, the needle ticked in the wrong direction.
Because the famous tech mantra, move fast and break things, it completely shatters when it hits 200 years of codified law.
Totally.
I mean, in a startup, if you write bad code, you just patch it the next day. If you want to fire an entire department to save money, you just send out an email.
But in the federal government, you are dealing with civil service protections, union contracts, congressional appropriations.
Exactly. You cannot legally fire career civil servants just because you want to streamline operations. The law specifically protects them from being dismissed for political reasons or, arbitrary cost cutting.
So the system protects itself. It is wrapped in armor. And that brings us to the second failure we found in the source material, which is all about the illusion of authority.
This is a huge one.
We are looking at a situation where power without a title is ultimately borrowed power.
This raises an important question. What is the difference between having profound influence and having a structural legal foundation?
Yeah, because he was publicly called the head of DOGE, and he certainly had the ear of the president.
Which is peak influence, absolutely. But the source material highlights that government lawyers were quietly downplaying his role behind the scenes from day one.
Oh, they had to, didn't they?
Yeah.
Because he wasn't a sworn government employee. He didn't go through Senate confirmation or anything like that.
Right. And when a lawsuit challenging his authority was actually filed, a federal judge allowed it to move forward.
Because the plaintiffs were arguing that outside advisory groups have to operate under strict transparency rules. Right. Like the Federal Advisory Committee Act or FACA.
Yes, exactly, FACA.
That's
you can't just have a private citizen making executive decisions about federal agencies without public oversight. It is illegal.
Right.
Influence relies entirely on the warmth of an interpersonal relationship. True authority, however, relies on a legal mandate.
So because he wasn't a sworn official, he had no structural power to actually order a federal agency to do anything. He could only suggest that the president order it.
Precisely.
So what does this all mean? I kind of want to push back on the idea that staying outside the structure is inherently a weakness.
Okay, how so?
Well, if you are trying to fundamentally disrupt a bureaucratic system, maybe you have to stay outside. Because if you become an official sworn employee, suddenly you are bound by the Hatch Act, which restricts your political activities.
Oh, that is true. And you have to comply with massive financial disclosure and conflict of interest laws.
Exactly. And for someone running multiple global companies, divesting all those assets just to become a standard government employee isn't just unappealing, it might be literally impossible.
You make a very valid point.
So maybe operating with borrowed power was the only legal way to wield that chainsaw in the first place.
I will concede that being an outside advisor does grant you an immense amount of operational freedom. You don't have to fill out all the ethics forms, and you can suggest radical ideas without violating the Hatch Act.
Right.
However, the data from this case study demonstrates the fatal vulnerability of that exact strategy. When your authority isn't codified in law, it is essentially just a loan from the person who does have the power.
And a loan can be called back at any given moment.
Exactly. The moment the interpersonal relationship with the president cools, your power evaporates instantly. You have no legal standing to fall back on, no department that officially reports to you. You are literally just a guest in the building.
And that fragility in the foundation is exactly what caused the dramatic collapse in May of 2025. The relationship did cool down, leading us to the third failure in our equation. The exit undid the entrance.
Yeah, the timeline of the exit is really a masterclass in how not to manage a transition.
It really is.
After 130 days, facing mounting legal setbacks and increasing clashes with official cabinet members, the people who actually possess the structural authority we were just talking about, the experiment ended.
And the whiplash of those final days is just jarring. I mean, you have this friendly, smiling photo op in the Oval Office. Everything looks perfectly amicable for the camera.
Right. Standard procedure.
And then, mere days later, the architect of this efficiency initiative and the president are publicly feuding online.
Just completely out in the open.
Yeah. And even though there was a later apology, the narrative was already completely fractured. A story that began with such immense momentum ended in a highly public, messy falling out.
We really have to view this through the lens of human psychology, specifically the recency effect. People are cognitively wired to remember the last chapter of a story the longest.
So how you leave a room matters just as much as how you enter it.
Maybe even more. You can do brilliant, transformative work for an organization, but if you burn the bridge on your way out, your legacy becomes the fire, not the architecture you built.
It is the difference between executing a carefully controlled demolition to make way for a new building versus, accidentally setting the structure on fire while you are still standing inside it.
That is exactly it. And the fallout also damaged the broader perception of the efficiency movement itself. When the leaders are arguing publicly, the media and the public focus on the interpersonal drama rather than the actual policy goals.
The friction overshadows the data. But, we have spent a lot of time on where the system fought back. But the Musk equation isn't just about the failures. Paradoxically, the sheer brute force used to get into that room in the first place resulted in our first major win.
Right. We have to look at the wins.
Despite the messy exit, we have to acknowledge how he engineered access.
What's fascinating here is the sheer tension between that ungraceful exit and the monumental feat of the entrance itself.
It is a huge contrast.
It is, because regardless of your stance on the politics or the methodology, we are analyzing an outsider who managed to buy, build, and earn his way into the absolute innermost sanctum of global power. That does not happen by accident.
No, it doesn't. He committed nearly $300 million and an unimaginable amount of his personal time, his brand equity, to engineer that access. He didn't just knock on the door of the West Wing.
He built a massive siege engine and breached the wall. Proximity to power is a deliberate, cultivated skill. It requires sustained, calculated investment. And while the average person listening to this deep dive obviously doesn't have $300 million to deploy, the underlying principle scales down perfectly to everyday life.
Oh, absolutely. Whether you are a postdoc trying to get a position in a highly competitive research lab or, a junior executive trying to get your ideas in front of the CEO, you have to engineer your own access.
You have to commit resources at a scale that your competitors just will not match. That might mean investing your personal time to master a niche software the lab desperately needs.
Or volunteering to take on the most difficult, unglamorous project in your corporate division.
Right. You have to offer a unique, undeniable value proposition. The inner circle of any organization is basically a fortified wall designed to keep noise out.
You don't get over it by simply submitting a resume and asking nicely. You have to force the system to acknowledge you.
And once you engineer that access, what you leave behind becomes your ultimate metric of success. Which brings us to the second win of the case study.
This is an important one.
Despite the public falling out, and despite the failure to hit the $2 trillion budget cut, the 130-day experiment was not a complete wash. The idea outlasted the individual.
Yeah, when he packed up his desk in May, the Department of Government Efficiency did not evaporate. The source material notes something really crucial here. His staffers, the loyalists he brought into the orbit, they remained embedded across various federal agencies.
And this is how bureaucratic influence actually works in practice. An unofficial advisor might not have the legal authority to fire anyone, but they can leverage their temporary proximity to power to ensure their allies are hired into official, permanent roles.
So those embedded staffers now hold the structural power the advisor lacked.
Exactly. Furthermore, the aggressive deregulation, efficiency-first mindset continued to shape the administration's agenda. While the macro spending didn't drop, specific variables like targeted agency staffing cuts showed measurable effects long after he was gone.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I look at this mechanism exactly like a viral injection in a biological organism.
Oh, that's an interesting analogy.
Right. So the host body, which is this massive federal bureaucracy, eventually recognized a foreign entity. The bureaucracy deployed its white blood cells, the government lawyers, the institutional friction, the cabinet members protecting their turf, and it successfully rejected the delivery mechanism.
It expelled the man.
Right. The delivery mechanism was flawed because it didn't adapt to the host environment. But before the delivered mechanism was destroyed, the viral RNA had already been injected into the host's cells.
I see where you're going with this.
Those embedded staffers, the new efficiency mandates, that is the genetic code. The host organism fought off the intruder, but its DNA is permanently altered. It will never function exactly the same way it did before January 2025.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the concept of institutional memory. It forces us to really reconsider the traditional definition of a legacy. Does leaving a mark actually require you to survive the political battles and stay in the room forever?
The data here suggests it doesn't.
It doesn't at all. You can fail to navigate the legalities, you can lose your borrowed power, and you can suffer a highly public exit. But if you have embedded your ideas and your people deeply enough into the machinery, you still win on a macro level. The machine just keeps running your code.
You overwrite the institutional memory. And for anyone trying to enact change, that is a profound realization. You don't have to be the CEO forever to fundamentally change the company.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we can clearly synthesize the 5 variables of the Musk equation.
Let's recap them.
We observed 3 distinct failures: underestimating the friction of a rigid system, relying on borrowed power without building a structural foundation, and exiting a relationship without the grace required to preserve the narrative.
But we balance those against 2 undeniable wins.
Yes. The engineering of unprecedented access through overwhelming investment, and the successful embedding of an ideological framework that outlived the creator's involvement.
See, when you strip away the partisan noise, you are left with pure, actionable data. You can take these 5 variables and apply them to your own career trajectory tomorrow morning.
You really can.
Ask yourself, are you relying too heavily on a warm relationship with your boss instead of establishing your own undeniable authority? Are you trying to apply startup tactics to a legacy corporation that is actively rejecting your methods?
Analyzing these massive cultural moments through a rigorous scientific lens is vital. It isn't about passing moral judgment on the actors involved. It is about extracting utility from their collisions.
Exactly. And we want to know how you're going to use this data. Which of these 5 lessons hits closest to home for you right now? I want to hear your perspective.
We'd love to hear it.
Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and you can find me on LinkedIn and TikTok to share your thoughts on this case study. We put all the links right there in the show notes. And keep following Dr. Sharifan's work, because bringing you this kind of impartial, data-driven analysis is the core mission of this channel.
Because understanding the mechanics of power and institutional inertia is the very first step to overcoming them.
So I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. We watched the most resourced individual on the planet, a man with almost limitless capital and unprecedented proximity to the highest office, failed to bypass institutional inertia using raw force.
Yeah.
He swung a metaphorical chainsaw at a 200-year-old bureaucratic vault, and the chainsaw simply bounced off the armor.
The system absorbed the blow because it was designed to withstand brute force.
Exactly. So look at your own life. Look at the changes you are trying to enact in your own organization, your lab, or your community. If a $300 million chainsaw couldn't cut through the red tape of a massive institution, how should you reevaluate your own approach to disruption?
That's the real question.
Do you need to keep swinging harder and faster? Or do you need to put down the chainsaw, study the architecture of the vault, and pick up a scalpel? Think about it. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Please remember to wait next week for another exciting episode of Lessons from a Scientist.